Watchmen is a groundbreaking graphic novel written by Alan Moore, illustrated by Dave Gibbons, and colored by John Higgins. Originally published as a 12-issue limited series by DC Comics from 1986 to 1987, it is widely regarded as one of the most influential works in the history of comics and graphic literature. The world of Watchmen is an alternate 1985 America, in a world where the existence of costume vigilantes has drastically altered history. The US won the Vietnam War and Richard Nixon is still president. The series won the Hugo Award and was named to Time magazine's list of the 100 best English-language novels published since 1923. The main characters of the novel are Rorschach, Dr. Manhattan, Night Owl 2, Silk Spectre 2, Asmodeus, and the Comedian. When our story begins, vigilantism is outlawed by a 1977 act called the Cleans Act that was put into force after an accidental death of a police officer during a riot. The comedian is murdered, thrown from the window of his apartment building. Rorschach, the only remaining vigilante who is still active, takes up the case. Rorschach is convinced that the murder was done by someone he calls the mass killer. He then goes around to the old team, informing them all that they are in danger. Few believe him, but it starts to uncover a massive conspiracy. The Watchmen, the book that changed everything. Why is The Watchmen so widely regarded by everybody to be the book that changed comic books in Western media? The story starts as a murder mystery, but it quickly devolves into a story of characters, of history, of themes, of artistic know-how, of politics. Everything in the story is built within the frame of a wider world. For example, Rorschach is investigating a murder investigation, but at the same time, this is when the Russians invaded Iraq and started the Cold War epidemic. Throughout the whole story, we are seeing the doom clock over and over again, with crochets of red flowing down onto it. We are constantly being told that war is right around the corner, that even tomorrow we are at the end of nuclear war. And the characters are what sells the story. Each of the main characters represents a different archetype of what it is to be a superhero. But more than that, they kind of represent what it is to live in a world like this, that your existence is almost non-consequential compared to everything going on around you. It's harsh, it's brutal, it's honest, truly deserves the pedestal that everyone has put it on. The Watchmen approaches several major themes that aren't really that well addressed within any other book. As the story progresses, we start to uncover this mystery. Rorschach is of course the lead investigator, but then it soon devolves that all characters in the book have something to play. The themes of the book is what really sells it. Don't get me wrong, the main plot's really good, but I think the reason why it sticks with so many people so hard is because of how it approaches things. Something that is repeated in the story over and over is the quote, "Who watches the Watchmen?" And I think that throws a lot of people off because people just assume that Watchmen is the name of the superhero group. In fact, they never actually called themselves that. They never actually formed a group at all. They originally got together and they were going to call themselves the Crime Busters, but that fell through. So then it kind of creates this question of who are the Watchmen that we're talking about here? And I think the book actually goes through several iterations of that. Before the book even starts, of course, it's the police officers of New York City. The cops were having a really hard time enforcing law, and they started wearing masks and going around to prevent people from targeting their families. After a while, vigilantes started to show up and take over what the cops were doing. The police took great offense to this. They thought the law should be in their hands. So they got together and made what was the Cleans Act after a huge riot and strike from the police force, outlawing all vigilantism, and have the government come in, and they say that they're going to become the people who are going to keep everyone safe. But that goes haywire as well. Richard Nixon gets elected for a third term, and the Cold War begins. And it creates this duality of nature of when all of society collapses, when you can't trust the government, you can't trust your neighbors, you can't trust the police force, who are you going to turn to? And the book kind of makes it sound like there's no correct answer, but there's no wrong answer either. Each of the superheroes in this book that I mentioned earlier, Rorschach, Night Owl, Silk Spectre, Dr. Manhattan, and Asmodeus, they all try to answer that question in their own way because they are independent heroes. Rorschach, who is the most disenfranchised of the whole group, he chooses to rage. He tries to eliminate everything that he sees as foul in the world. He is probably the most archetypical vigilante. He only has his shirt on his back, the fact that he's a dirty fighter. He does not compromise on anything. But at the same time, that's also his biggest flaw, because in the fact that everything that's evil in the world is his own perception, you start to see things like he's prescribed to the frontiersmen. He's also extremely homophobic, and he has a great distrust towards everybody. And he's also the only of the superheroes who actively uses deadly force while fighting crime. We have Night Owl, who just kind of accepts it. When the Clean Act came through, he put up the cape, he stopped being a superhero, and he just decided to live his life. And even though he probably lives the most peaceful life, he's also probably the most miserable. He can never actually fully turn his back on it. As a matter of fact, every time that you see a silhouette of him or you see his shadow, you don't see the shadow of just the person, you see the shadow of the Night Owl. And every time that he goes down and looks at his uniform, he's seen as in a reflection of the Night Owl uniform. And that kind of leads us to Silk Spectre. Silk Spectre is the only female of the group, and her actual name is Silk Spectre too, because she actually inherited the costume from her mother. She has kind of a unique perspective on it in that she is the only generational superhero. And for that, she's also the most rebellious and the most confused. Because she lived her life through the narrative of what her mother wanted, she actually doesn't even really know what she wants for herself. For example, she openly says multiple times that she doesn't like being a superhero, but then every single chance that she gets to be a hero, she takes it. The comedian, who actually is the person who dies in the beginning, probably had the most morbid sense of it, where instead of rejecting it, he openly embraced it. He became a wet boy for the government, doing all their dirty work and assassinations. And he built this Jokerish mentality about it. That's why he calls himself the comedian, where it's all for nothing. There's no actual reason behind it, very nihilistic sense of humor. And that kind of creates a question, well, okay, you can do that, but to what extent? What is the breaking point? Like, even if you're okay with doing horrible things like killing people, performing acts of violence in the name of the government, at what point does it become too much? And then finally, you have Asmodeus and Dr. Manhattan, who are the only two characters who are in positions to actually do something about it. Asmodeus is your archetype smartest man type of superhero, where he is just naturally the most gifted, the most brilliant, and he actually comes up with an idea of how he's going to save the universe. And, well, I shouldn't say the universe, how he's going to save the world. And that's where his story comes in. And we round up with Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan is unique out of the whole cast, as he is the only superhero in this book. He was caught in a particle accelerator that completely deconstructed his whole body on a molecular level, but his consciousness remained, and this allowed him to reconstitute himself into a being once more. But it also completely changed how he reacts with everything in the universe. He can command atoms to rearrange themselves. He can control things of physiology. He can control matter with just a thought. But even more so, and the one thing that's very hard to come across, is his perception of time has completely altered. And this is one of the most fascinating things about the book. Alan Moore went off and said the Watchmen can't exist as anything but a comic. And I think a big reason for that is the character Dr. Manhattan. Now, when he said that, a lot of people kind of confuse that, and they're saying, oh, well, he's just kind of being facetious. He just wants it to be a comic book. That's why he takes his name out of all the credits for the movies, for the TV shows. No, he had a very good point here, because until you read the comic, you don't understand what exactly it means to see time differently. Dr. Manhattan sees all time simultaneously. He doesn't have a past, he doesn't have a future, he doesn't have a present. There is only time. He cannot perceive it linearly, and for that he can't really relate with any human being on the planet. And this is not a mystery. It outright says it several times in the book. Matter of fact, every time someone asks him about it, he sits down and he tries to explain it to them, like, oh, well, I don't see time like that. I've already done this event. This event already unfolded in the future, the past, the present. It just unfolded. It doesn't really matter to me at all. The reason why I say you can only really say that through a comic book is because how they perform this in the book is they're constantly doing recap imagery. So they're showing you things from the future, they're showing you things from the past, they're showing you things that are happening right now. But through Dr. Manhattan's perspective, they're all happening at the exact same instant. And it's kind of tragic, because even though he's trying his best to explain it to everybody, this is how he sees the world, even the women that love him, there's two of them. He had one girlfriend, and then Silk Spectre is his new lover. He tries to sit down and explain to them, like, this is how it works, this is how I see time. And they just don't get it. They keep on thinking that he's just being weird, that he's being overly intellectual, and he's trying to explain to them, like, no, you don't understand. The reason I'm behaving this way is because I'm supposed to behave this way. I already know what's going to happen. I can no more change the future than I can change the past, which is also in the present for me. Time is circular. No movie could do that. No TV show could do that. That's really only something non-sequential art that is comics can do. And I think that kind of blew a lot of people's minds back in the day. It blew my mind when I first read the book. And then just going back to my opinion of the book, it is so weird. Like, I read it once when I was way back in high school. When I was like 17, I read it, and my favorite character was Rorschach, and I was like, oh yeah, man, I can't believe we live in a society, and all that angsty young kid stuff. Reading it again as an adult, I was really taken aback. Like, I'm gonna be honest, when I was 17, although homophobic, racist stuff kind of went over my head when it came to Rorschach. But now I'm like reading it again, and it is kind of this atypical mirror of what it is to be human, told through a comic book of superheroes, and it kind of blew my mind. Like, what do you do when society lets you down? Do you rage? Do you go with it? Do you just abandon it? What are your options, and what makes those options good or bad? And the book doesn't judge you for which ones you pick. As a matter of fact, it creates a whole spectrum for you to choose from. That's why there's 5 characters in the book. So the quote, "Who watches the Watchmen?" comes up again, because do we watch the Watchmen? Does the government? Does the police force? Does the army? And if they're the Watchmen, who's watching them? It creates an Ouroboros effect of, within society, there's no possible way that you can govern the whole thing and be fair to everybody simultaneously all at once. And The Watchmen is the only book that I ever even heard of tackling it in broad spectrum. There's, of course, books that do approach it, that do talk about it, but this is the only one where I see them being like, okay, you could do this, but this is the problem with that. You could probably do this, but then here's the problem with that. Well, this is why this is a good idea, but who knows? And it blows my mind. The fact that DC didn't let Alan Moore use any of their original characters, you can tell if you're a comic book fan, like within the last 10 years of comic books, they have regretted that so much. They want so badly for Watchmen to be canon in the DC main universe, and it's just not. I don't see how the Watchmen can exist anything else other than a comic. You can watch the movie, you can watch the HBO series, you can even like them. I like them. I thought the movie was pretty cool. But you have to read the comic because the comic is the only way that they can tell this story. And that's why it's one of the ones I had to cover on this channel. And thanks for listening to me rant on this. I really hope I convinced you guys to go read a comic that I really enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps me out. And I'll see you guys next